We're singing, we're singing, we're singing, yes. Shine your light, say, shine your light, and we're singing, oh. Savior, we say, Savior. My God is forever, forever. He rose and conquered. He rose and conquered. He rose and he rose and Jesus. God, Lord, we bless you tonight. God, we thank you, Lord, that you are mighty to save. You are able to save every soul. So we say, my God is awesome. He can move mountains. Hide me from my God is awesome. Strength for our strength where forever he will reign. My God is, he can move mountains, he can move, keep me in the valley, hide me from the rain. My God is, oh, heal me when I'm broken, strength where I've been weak. Yes, God. Come on, let's declare the chorus. My God is awesome. Yes, he is. He's awesome. He's awesome. My God is awesome. Yes, he is awesome. Hallelujah, awesome. Yes, he's awesome. Come on, say he's mighty. He's mighty. He's mighty. He's mighty. Awesome. Yes, he's awesome. Oh, say he's holy. He's holy. He's holy. He's holy. Awesome. Yes, you are awesome. Come on, let's declare he's great. Say he's great. He's great. He's great. He's great. Awesome. Yes, you are. You're awesome. Yeah. Say deliverer. 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 Awesome. Yeah. My God is awesome. Savior of the whole, giver of sound. By his stripes I am. My God is. Today I am for. His grace is why I'm living. Praise his holy name. Today I am forgiven. His grace is why I'm living. Praise his holy name. Today I am forgiven. His grace is why I'm. Praise his holy name. I reach my hand to the heavens. I lift my eyes where my help comes from. I I look to you, my rock, my healer. I trust in you. Healing is here. God, Lord, we thank you tonight. The healing is here. Oh God, healing is here. Oh, and I receive it. Come on, can we declare that tonight? Healing is here. Healing is here. Oh God, healing is here, God. Healing is here. Come on, this is not just physical healing, this is emotional healing tonight. Healing is here. Thank you, God. And I receive it. And I receive it. I reach my hand. I reach my hand to the heavens. I lift my eyes where my help comes from. I look to you, my rock, my healer. I trust in you. I lift my hand. I lift my hand to the heavens. I lift my eyes where my help comes from. I look to you, my rock, my healer. I trust in you. Jesus is here. God, Lord, we declare that tonight. Jesus is here. Oh, Jesus is here. And I will worship. And I will worship. Come on, one more time. Jesus is here. Jesus is here. Oh, Jesus is here. Yes, you are, God. You are high and lifted up. Jesus is here. And I will worship. And I will worship.
Praise the Lord. We give him all the honor, all the glory, and all the praise. And Father, Lord, we thank you for your healing anointing in this service this evening. We commit every aspect of this service into your hands, Lord. Father, Lord, we've come, dear God, to discuss the business, dear God, pertaining to prison ministry. But more importantly, we are here, dear God, to discuss and to have fellowship with you and in your presence in your assembly. And we invite the Holy Spirit to come and have his total and complete will this evening. I ask your anointing upon the panelist, the moderator. I ask your anointing upon all present here this evening. Father, Lord, as we prepare to receive this evening's gifts, tithes, and offering, we pray, dear God, your anointing and your blessings upon it. Bless it and bless the giver and the gifts this evening, that your kingdom will be established in the earth. These things we pray and ask in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. Just warmly welcome the person next to you before taking your seat this evening. This evening, the prison ministry will host a panel discussion to look at issues pertaining to the reintegration of former inmates back into mainstream community. At the beginning of her tenure as senior pastor of this assembly, Reverend Joel Callender saw the need to reestablish the prison ministry here at this assembly. And it has given us the opportunity to partner with Healing for the Soul ministry to assist in programs at Her Majesty's Prison, as well as assist with former inmates in terms of follow-up. This evening is of significance in the fact that quite recently, we received into membership someone who had recently been released from Her Majesty's Prison Dolls. They've gone through our inquiries class, baptized, and they were receiving a membership. They're currently receiving counseling and benefiting from our remedial program. And we're helping out in whatever means we can. So you can see that it is very practical. God burdened our pastor, our senior pastor's heart that he will send the broken, the depressed, the oppressed through these doors. And we have to be prepared and equipped to minister to them. So the significance of this panel discussion this evening, I pray that you will be blessed and that you will participate fully and you will receive all that is said and done. The offering has already been prayed for. I'm going to ask the church to come forward. You will come forward joyfully this evening. And immediately after the offering, Brother Sean Callender, our moderator for this evening, will introduce the panel and he will proceed from there. You can bring forward your gifts and your offering.
Good evening. Welcome to our panel discussion for this evening. The topic, moving beyond stigma and discrimination as we seek to assist in the reintegration of former inmates of the prison service into mainstream society. And with me this evening, I have some eminent panelists to help discuss this topic. First, we have to my right, Lena Weeks, who is the sentence manager for the prison service. Then, right next to her is Marlon Charles. He's a representative from Healing for the Soul, Barbados. And Neil Dowden, Executive Director of Prison Fellowship, Barbados. Good evening and welcome. Now, before we get into this evening's discussion, I just want you to share a bit about yourself and well, in the case of Lena, it wouldn't be ministry because you work at the prison, but in terms of Neil and Marlon, tell us a little bit about your organization. So we'll start with the ladies first.
Good evening, everyone. I do consider my job ministry because it is only by the grace of God that I am able to do my job. Um, I fell in love with this thing called criminology when I was completing my A levels at Commerce. And at the time, people often looked at me like if I was crazy. My first degree is in law, and so the natural course of progression would obviously be towards becoming a lawyer. But I saw a group of persons in society who people were overlooking, who we were not looking into the reasons why people were committing crime. And I recognized that the day would come that we would have to do that. And so I decided to become a criminologist. Sentence management essentially entails looking at the different reasons why people come to prison, or why people come to find themselves in situations where they commit crime. And then it is engaging in a process of encouraging them to be part of rehabilitation. And through the assistance of the church, we have been able to engage our population. We continue to engage our population in that process. So I do consider it to be ministry.
Here again, and I want to say thank you to the pastor and the administration here. And again, I must acknowledge the third row, the prison ministry team. I love you dearly. They are some dedicated people who have been working alongside Healing for the Soul Empowerment Network, committed at bringing transformation within HMP Dodds. Healing for the Soul Empowerment Network has been in existence for over 10 years. It was founded by Judy P. Linton. She is a Barbadian that resides in New York and founded Healing for the Soul, which actually leads a prison ministry in New York. It was extended here by crusades and a number of different initiatives they started, which is Project Change, Embracing Change, and it spans from HMB Dodds, and they also work within the government industrial school. We are really geared at partnership, and that's the transition we have been making over the few years, because working within one aspect, which is responding to crime and those in these institutions, is one. But what about what happens after? So what we have been doing is partnering with different entities like probation department and other ministries to work with inmates who are coming out and helping them with clothing, jobs, or education. And that's what we focus on doing right now. How can we build capacity? The other aspect is really helping empower the persons who work within the organization. What we started last year with the administration in the prison was working with the officers. Going in to do ministry with the inmates is one thing, helping them get better. And one of the complaints is, what about the officers? What about the staff? So we're trying to have a holistic approach, and what we also do is to provide assistance in any way through the resources of the team members and persons that we can get to partner with the ministry to also go in and provide whatever technical assistance we can to the institution. So I want to say thank you again to People's Cathedral, those who support, those who pray. Continue to assist and pray and give in any way that you can, because I tell you, we are making a difference. So thank you again.
I want to say pleasant good afternoon to everyone here. I represent Prison Fellowship Barbados. It's been in existence for more than 40 years working in the prison. And I want to give God thanks because He has given us the opportunity, because it's a God-given opportunity to work in the prison. And part of our mandate is working with the prisoners while they're in prison, while they're out of prison. And we also work with the children and the family of the inmates as well, where we do our programs help to provide school clothing, Christmas presents, food, etc. for children all year round, like bus fares to school and the different needs of the children. Because you can't only focus on the prisoners, because when a man goes to prison, a whole family is affected. And so part of the job is to not only help the family, but to break that cycle so that the children could see that there's a different way and there are people that love them enough to help them. So part of our role is to want to break the cycle and also to help the guys when they come out. We've placed a lot of them in employment. We've put guys in our own homes, etc., so that we can help them. We work very closely with the prison and even with Father Clement Paul. So when they come out, he will call and say, well, these guys have nowhere to stay, because a lot of us as families don't remember that God is a God of second chance. And if these guys have been into prison and they've paid their dues, we should also give them a second chance to reintegrate into society and become better citizens. But our society has become so closed that we stigmatize them for the rest of their lives. And it causes them to turn back to the only thing that they know, and that is crime. So part of our roles as Christians is not only to go into the prison, but to work with them when they come out and let them know that we love them and God loves them.
Thank you very much. Now, I want to invite you, the audience, if you have any questions or to make, that you're free to make your questions. Just raise your hand. Somebody will give you a mic, and you're free to quiz the panel on anything that you find of importance. But my first question for the evening is, the topic is moving past stigma and discrimination. What are some of the stigmas or discrimination that we find exists in our society today? I'll start with Neil.
I could give you hundreds of examples, but
Give
I'll
me
give you one.
Give me 25.
I'll give you one. I run a small farm, and part of my motto is that you can't only speak the language. When the guys come out of prison, I try to employ them. I was driving through my street one day, and a lady stopped me. She said to me, do you know that the guy that you're employing came out of prison? I said, yes, I do, and I've got a few more that are going to come to work with me. And that's the type of thing that these guys face. I've known guys that had jobs, and when the employer knew that they came out of prison, they were subsequently sacked. And when we checked with the employer, they were doing good work. But it's just that somebody mentioned that these guys came out of prison, having paid for what they've done, and they're not given a second chance. So that's one example. There are guys that come out and come to us, and this is an indictment to us, that would have come to our churches and people shun them because they know that they've come from prison. And church is the one place that they should find love. So that's something that we need to work on.
Marlon, you care to add to this?
I can only echo the same sentiments, because for those we've been dealing with also over the course of the few years we've been working, persons getting employment after the employer realized this person, or somebody's telling them that this person was incarcerated, immediately dismiss the persons. And the same goes for church members. Some people we approach, can you kindly employ one of these guys to clean up? They're afraid of doing it. So that's one of the greatest things, and you even hear it in some of the meetings that we have, and this is at probation department and other organizations. They say it all the time. This is a very unforgiving society, and that is something that we need to change, especially here within the kingdom of God.
Well, Lena, as a criminologist, you care to share what can we do really to overcome this stigma? The society is small, and we kind of know people that went to jail and stuff. What can the society do in order to improve on how we see these individuals?
Before I answer that question, I want to share something with you, because I think the best way to speak to some of these challenges is to hear from the inmates themselves. And so I brought with me a little note from one of our offenders. He's now in the community and actually doing quite well through the assistance of the church. But I had to do a presentation sometime last year, and I had asked him to give me a few words to speak to the people so that they can understand his personal plight and the plight of the other offenders. I'm a 56-year-old male who is presently serving a 27-month sentence for theft. I have been to prison 9 or 10 times, with my first sentence being in 1991. All of my convictions were a direct result of criminal activities committed to support my chronic addiction to crack cocaine. In addition, my experience over the years is that through careful observation, a large percentage of recidivism can be attributed to drug addicts reoffending. The rehabilitation programs in the prison need to be strengthened, especially the drug program. There also needs to be greater inmate-public interaction. This would be beneficial for sensitizing society and corporate Barbados to unseen qualities in offenders and ex-convicts. Because of my lack of family support, I always have to hit the ground running. Many inmates, myself included, suffer from low self-esteem and self-worth, as well as guilt for those whom we have hurt and disappointed. Subsequently, we crave appreciation and acceptance, which is seldom given by society. With every admission to prison, acceptance, employment opportunities, trust, and confidence are eroded further. Nevertheless, I desperately wish to halt this continuing downward spiral, and this can only be achieved by change. Change in choices, actions, desires, sacrifices, implementing and adhering to specific boundaries, humility, setting achievable goals, and more. If I can exhibit this level of self-control in prison, why can't I do it outside? While I was driving here this evening, I said, Lord, why does this always happen when I'm about to speak in public on behalf of the prison? We had a shooting which would have occurred at Charles Road Bridge just last night. And I'm sure that some of you may be saying, well, we understand in some regard the importance of accepting persons back into society, but how do we reconcile that with what is currently going on in relation to violence? The University of the West Indies would have conducted a study last year of a number of at-risk communities, showing that these communities have been severely neglected. And so as much as we want to look at public protection, we want to make sure that Barbados is still a safe place, part of that is acknowledging the amount of work that has to be done within the community. We are strained in the criminal justice system tremendously. We have put a number of proposals on the table. We are working steadily, as Marlon said, in relation to our partnerships and so on. But we recognize that the only way that we will be able to make a difference is by engaging the community. And so just this week, I had told Marlon that in our meetings with the superintendent, we decided that we want to really go into the community and have more of these discussions to really hear from you some of the ways that you see us going forward. I can tell you that we have partnered with the UNDP in relation to a number of our projects. We still have a lot of legislative changes to be implemented, but to answer the heart of your question, the only way that we can assist ex-offenders is through a public health approach. A number of them, when they come outside, they have no choice but to be entrepreneurs, which is something which is very difficult. In Barbados, even for small businessmen, it is very, very difficult. And so it is trying to assist them with their qualifications and those types of things, which is a very difficult process. And so we are looking to engage the community at a greater level to help us with some of those resources which we need.
So what type of rehabilitation programs are available now to inmates in order to help them to readjust to the society?
Our rehabilitation programs are based, by and large, on the type of population that we have. Over the last 5 years, we've seen a significant shift where previously we would have focused a lot of our attention on the sentence part of the population. Now we have more persons on remand than we do sentence. And so we've had to shift our thinking a bit to also accommodate those persons because some of them will get bail and so on, time served, and then they return to society. Rehabilitation for remands is a little bit different because they're still in limbo, more or less, innocent until proven guilty. And so through the Embracing Change program, we try to get them to look at cognitive skills, their thinking, reasons why they would have gone into criminal activity and so on. On the sentence side of the population, it is a little easier to engage because you're sentenced by the court. So there's that admission of guilt and so on, and so you can go through the process. But primarily, we focus on thinking and living skills, drug rehabilitation. In the reintegration program, we look at etiquette, and the educational side of it is also very important. I must say that we do very well at CXCs every year, but still, there's a significant amount of work that needs to be done in the educational program because we have a number of inmates in need of remedial care as well. And so there are a number of gaps which we need to fill, and the church has helped us significantly with that, but we still have a long way to go in that regard.
Neil, what is Prison Fellowship doing in terms of the rehabilitation as well? How do you assist the prisons as well?
Well, what we're doing currently is that we trying to set up a few workshops. We've acquired equipment like in carpentry, tailoring, etc. Because one of the areas is that when these guys come out with the skills that they would have learned in prison, they need an avenue to use those skills. And since that corporate barbers is not producing the avenue, we're trying on our side to help them, as my colleague said, to become entrepreneurs themselves, give them an area where they can work for themselves. But in order to become an entrepreneur, you need finances. So that's where we come. We try to facilitate that area. And we're now trying as well, we're setting up with the help of God a computer resource center. Because what we found last year in giving out our, a lot of these kids that live with their grandmothers don't have basic Wi-Fi or computer. We had a child that is in large school, he's a student, but he doesn't have a computer, he doesn't have any way to do his homework. So it's those basic things that we're trying to help them. Where we see the need, we try to respond by helping. But one of the greatest things that is needed here is what is called a halfway house, where these guys, when they come out, there's somewhere to go, and then they can further continue the work that is done in prison and to help them. We've not got a halfway house. So all the good work that they would have done in prison, that thing that's called survival, when they come out and they're on the street and the families don't want them, the basic instinct to survive drives them back to crime. So a halfway house, and it is an indictment that in the year 2020, in a country like Barbados, we're still talking about a halfway house. And I think that's an area where, as a church, we should lead. We've got numerous buildings and lands, etc. I know we wait on government to do these things, but sometimes the church, and I don't speak about a specific church, but we're the church. The church should step up and take the place in this area because we are supposed to provide active solutions to the problems that we have in society. So we pray that these things will not happen, but then we've got to move beyond the prayer and start to do some practical work. So one of the greatest areas that we need is a halfway house. A lot of guys come out, and when they come out, their families don't want them. They don't even have basic, something like an ID card to go and, if they were to get a welfare check, to go to the bank with the ID card, they don't have it, and you've got to wait weeks. And these are things that could be sorted out easily.
Well, you talked about how the church can help. So how practically could we help now, say, to contribute to this halfway house?
The first thing all of our churches could look around, we must have a building somewhere that we can put into rooms and say, well, there are 10 rooms here. Let these guys come out, spend 6 months. They don't have to look for first and last month rent, and just get themselves so they can be gainfully employed and then move into society and become proper contributors in society. And that's one of the main things. I know that it sounds as though we're asking the church to do a lot, but the church has been placed in here to make a difference. And that's a way that we can make a difference. I mean, we build beautiful buildings that we come in on Sundays, we worship, then we close during the week, or we have 2 services during the week, and then we come back in next Sunday and worship. A beautiful building that's not used to its full potential.
But you see, I can get real now because, you see, we might be thinking to ourselves, the beautiful building, do we want convicts to be in our beautiful building without being supervised?
Well,
how are we addressing the fear that some people have of including these individuals back into society, given some of the crimes that some may have committed?
I understand that, but I'm going to be practical as well. I have had prisoners live in my house for over, one guy lived there for nearly a year, plus he got married and then moved out. And I've never asked him, what did you do to go into prison? Because in my mind, if you say that you're saved and God has saved you, he's forgotten what you did. And I've got my family, I've got my wife, I've got my children, but I trust God. And what I'm saying is that as Christians, we got to trust God. And yes, there might be some times when people are going to fail and go back. But that doesn't mean that we shut the program down. No program guarantees 100% success. Even when Christ healed the 10 lepers, only one came back. He had 10% success. But it didn't stop his ministry.
And Marlon, I see you're from Healing for the Soul. So on the emotional side, what are you all doing emotionally to address some of the challenges that these individuals have as they try to rehabilitate to the society?
Well, what I would do, I want to piggyback on what Brother Neil was saying in terms of, I want to look at it holistic, because that's just one aspect of what's going on. What we tend to do is to look at the big picture. Again, with partnership, working with the prison aftercare committee, and we want to try to fill the gap that's there. So when we look at what's happening in transitioning them from inside the institution, working with the reintegration officer, who is a member of the aftercare committee, which we're working with, what we initiated 4 months ago was a program to assist them from inside coming right out. So once a month we have meetings, and what we do at these meetings, we have different presenters, and we have different topics. We provide what's needed. So persons from different ministries, so we talk about the ID card, that was the issue. So what we have going on there for all the inmates, we start notifying them from inside to make sure, this is Mr. Bentham, that we get letters for them and get all these things organized. So we're trying to bring order holistically to the entire process. So talking about emotion, yes, that would have something to do with it, but what we're looking at is the entire holistic process and trying to bring together all the different entities that will be able to equip and assist the transition. Again, I have to echo what Neil is saying. We need the church to pitch in terms of the entities coming together to help assist. We need a halfway home. We need somewhere that would assist in the progression of these men flowing back into society, because many of us, if I have to ask you, anybody here would open up their home if I tell you there's somebody coming out tomorrow? Anybody? Please see me after. But that's the reality, right? Christ save all of us and give us his grace. They are no different. I mean, when you get to know these guys, I don't know if I could beg, but there's a song one of the guys sing called Judge Not. And if he really sang this song from his heart, and just like Brother Neil, I don't ask them what they were in for. But when you hear what these guys are saying now and how they are transformed, it's no doubt about it that God did something for them. So it is on us now, the people of God, I think we need to really open up our hearts. The same way that we were forgiven, we need to also extend that same forgiveness to these men to help them come back into society. So to answer you two in terms of emotionally,
As organizations, we are strong enough as the members and the people within our organization. But we as society, we need to start being that person as an individual first, being forgiven. And I think that's one of the ways we can stop the cycle of what is taking place. Because we could do our job as healing for the soul and prison fellowship and what they're doing on the inside. But if we want to make a difference and really stop what's taking place, which is a cycle, we ought to do what Christ commissioned us to do, to really love and forgive. So put your love glasses on when you look at somebody next time.
Oh, there's someone with a question over here. And there's one over here as well. Well, there's 3 questions.
Thank you very much. I wish to compliment the Assembly for hosting this session, and indeed I recognize and appreciate the effort of all the participants and their role being played. I want to ask the question, is there a female population of prisoners in this country? Because I have heard when these guys and these guys and these guys and these guys, I want to know if there's a female population in prison. And I also want to ask the question whether or not the male population on return to, on release from prison, suffer the same stigmatization as the female population suffer. And the third aspect I wish to put on the table is whether or not the programs that are available to accommodate the development of women are similar to those for development of men. Isn't it that there are programs and funding and all sorts of processes to support development of women that have never been made available to men? And could that be part of the problem that is resulting in a higher percentage population of men in prison? Thank you.
All right, I'm trying to remember all 3 questions, so just please help me, sir. Our female population has always been significantly smaller. And so from my time, my prison career, which has been 12 years thus far, we fluctuate 25 to 30. Our highest numbers thus far for females have been 41, compared to a male population that is 700 odd. And I venture to say that that is not just in the context of crime, but what is going on in society generally, in terms of some of the issues that men find themselves in generally. I want to go back to some of the things that my colleagues were talking about earlier. I take my son to Scouts every weekend, and when I get there, I see very few males who are volunteering and engaging and pouring into the lives of young men. A lot of young men now are opting to either be on the block or in other areas where they lime and gather, because we have to be very careful and put things in context. Not every block has a gang. Not every social gathering is for the purpose of criminal activities. So we must ask ourselves, why is it that men in society prefer to gather around rum shops? Because sometimes we can be very judgmental of other younger people, but if I could speak for my community of Ellerton, that has probably about 7 churches, we have just as many rum shops. And quite often on one side of the road, you see guys who are smoking, and on the other side of the road, the older men who are drinking. And so it is not so much as a criminal activity problem, but a problem that we have to ask ourselves in society generally, what is happening to our men, our leaders? Why do they prefer to be away from home and around all of these different social gatherings. Our female population also primarily comprises of persons who are non-national. So most of our females have committed crimes like drug trafficking, drug importation, for either marijuana or cocaine. So we generally do not have many Barbadian nationals who are women in prison. Over the last 5 years, we've seen a few dynamics with the Barbadian females, where some have been charged for firearm-related offenses, where they have been assisting a male companion in either concealing a weapon on their behalf, and in a few cases, we've seen manslaughter-related incidences, but primarily, we have a very low female population. The experience of an incarcerated female and male are quite different. And so when we speak to rehabilitation, we always try to make sure that it is within the context of the risk factors and also within the context of the gender. Females tend to be generally more emotional, and so we focus a lot of our rehabilitation programs towards that and family dynamics and so on. And you would be surprised to know, sir, that we actually have more rehabilitation programs for the males in prison than we do the females. Your last question, if you could repeat your last question.
The final question, I think, is at the root of all of this. The programs and initiatives that exist to support the development of women vis-a-vis men. And I can speak to this for the next hour if you want, but I wouldn't, because at the root may be the absence of programs to facilitate the development of men. And I ask whether or not we are tackling the symptoms and not going to the root. Why don't we advocate for more programs and more funding to support development of men in entrepreneurship, men in business? I can tell you that across the globe right now, there are millions of dollars that have been directed to support women in entrepreneurship, but not men. And I can go on and on and on and on, but I'll stop.
I think what happens is that sometimes we forget that we exist. The world is supposed to exist in a state of equilibrium. And for some time, because we as females historically had to fight for our rights in terms of working and studying and those types of things, we went on a course internationally, because this is a global problem for a very long time in terms of, and you're quite right, sir, empowering females and pouring into that. And we more or less started to neglect our males. And so what you're finding now here in Barbados is that women are leading. The director of public prosecutions, we have a female prime minister. And while these are very good things, and the governor general as well, Marlon is giving me a reminder, we also have to maintain that balance in society, and I think that's what we're missing. So I use my example in relation to my son. The fact that more and more in terms of the Scout movement, you are seeing more females leading. And while as a female in a male-dominated profession, I am very proud to stand as a female in the significance of that. Males are very important. There are certain things that I can't teach my son, that his father has to teach him, his grandfather has to teach him, just by name and nature of being a male. And so I do quite agree with you that these are things that we have to look at from the community standpoint, and I'm emphasizing community because, as Marlon said earlier, as many efforts that we use in prison and we try to prepare the guys and so on, without the absence of supervision within the community and persons to encourage both male and female, and we apologize because very often when we speak, and we say the guys and so on, we're really referring to males. Yeah, we're really, the law really refers to males and females in that context. But we do need to look at programs specifically which speak to maleness, because we do have situations where men in society, and I'm not only just saying young men, are struggling with a number of issues.
Good evening to the panel, and again, welcome and congratulations to the church for having taken the opportunity to mount this very important presentation this evening. My colleague who preceded me really dealt with passion to some of the things that I had on my mind. Well, let me say, not facetiously, but thank God for the good women of Barbados, that we have so few in prison, and the majority of females in prison being not from Barbados. But to a very serious point, and even before I go there, let me say too, that one point where I tend to go slightly different to my colleague is that I believe that the males in Barbados are being marginalized. The very system of co-education has played a very significant role in affecting how young men have come out of that age group and struggle. But that is a discussion for a debate elsewhere. The other thing is that, and I would really like now to challenge you, I sincerely appreciate the views expressed with regards to the idea of a halfway house. I do not believe for one moment that it is just the role of the church, and I don't think that's what you meant when you said that. I think it's a societal challenge. But I want to say to those of you who are involved in the penal institutions and the training and the rehabilitation, that you need, if I may say so, to come with a proposal, not only for the church, but for community. You need to be able to tell Barbados just how many young men or how many men of all ages come out of prison on an annual basis. You need to say to the community how many of them are unwelcomed by their families. You alluded to that, and I accept that that is a reality. But I want to say to you that Barbadians are unaware of how significant that could be. If you can tell Barbados the degree to which that is a fact, then you will stimulate support for your halfway house. You need also to tell Barbados what a halfway house will cost. You've got to do the work. You've got to say, look, we need an institution to house 50 people, 60 people, 150 people. This is what it's going to cost. The question has been raised how long the process will take. It isn't everybody who will have as good a heart as to have someone who has served their time in prison come and stay with them for whatever reason for a year and a half. That is unreasonable. You are to be congratulated, sir, and may the Lord richly bless you. And I say so with all sincerity. But in reality, you're saying to all of us here, and anyone within who's listening to us, that there is a need for a halfway house. I appeal to you to come with a proposal which will outline some of the things that I have shown to you this evening. And I am confident that you will make headway and that there will be people who will be prepared to contribute to making it a reality.
Just want to give a quick response to that question. It's very valid. We have already actively engaged a number of entities for more or less designing a facility that also includes the boys and girls from the government industrial school and for those exiting HMP. So we did do some research into it, and this is a partnership
with the probation department because they deal with everything from the adolescents, those who are in the school system, and those who are in these institutions like HMP Dodds. So we're looking at the population and what's going on and how we can provide a facility that would meet the needs of both populations. So we did last month engage one entity in trying to secure, let's say, a transitional period of a year where we could equip them, and then once they are on their feet, they can then move out. So we are looking at that. So as you give that suggestion, what we will gladly do, you may know someone who can help us, so we'd approach you after and see how we can get that worked out.
Yeah, good afternoon to everyone. Today, with your question about how the halfway house, or who will look after it or protect it. I think this halfway house, if we do have one, it will get, you trust me, it will get protected. You could trust me on that. You ever give a black man a key yet? Just give one of those prisoners the key that come over to that prisoner, you will see how it get protected.
It's true.
And to everyone, my name is Terrence Wilson. I'm a former inmate. Miss Weeks, nice to see you. A very good woman. And so, Mr. Neal, I must say thank you very much. I bow to you, sir. I was the inmate that came out of prison. And not that I had nowhere to stay. I had somewhere to stay. But the environment. And my intention was not to go back out there. And I take that. Before I leave prison, I always had an intention in my head that I ain't coming back to this prison. But I tell myself, the environment that I am going to know, I'm not staying here. So I went to Mr. Paul, and I told him that I don't want to stay down. And the environment was the red zone. I don't know if you all know about the red zone, the Marhole, Horse Road. I was raised up that side, and being out there, I end up in prison. And I know if I was to go and stay there, I would end back the same way, because I would go back in the same environment. And I went to Mr. Paul, and I told Mr. Paul my situation. Then he referred me to this gentleman here, and this gentleman referred me to Mr. Neal. And I went on that farm with Mr. Neal, and I told Mr. Neal my situation, and Mr. Neal asked me no questions at all. He took me in. I worked on that farm for nearly 2 years. Although I leave, he housed me for a year. I get married. He also even did my wedding. The caterer and everything, Mr. Neal do it for me. And then I happened to leave Mr. Neal, not leaving for the years still here with him. Right now, he could call for me anytime in this world, and I would be there. Because he's a good man. And ain't much people could do that. I see inmates go to prison and people let them down. I mean inmates that will want this chance, but can't get it. And people reject them because they were in prison, even for small, little petty things. People discriminate you for that. Turn the backs on them. And you know what? They have no other choice. Go in the boy and want to get in the help or nothing, so they're going to end up back in the same thing. But if you listen to them, or get somebody to listen to them, they won't end back up there. But sometimes it don't be easy. And for me, I got to thank God. God did a long stretch, and I do 2 mornings. I had 2 like sentences in prison, and I came out to 30 years at my appeal. I had to do 25 and 9 months and 2 weeks. And I'm here standing now because of the love and grace of God. And since that, I'm married. I went to jobs, and I get turned down from jobs. And I tell myself I'm not giving up. So I ended up having a job in Swan Street in stores. I had to deal with 3 stores in Swan Street because I distribute the things for the stores. And then I found out that bad company come around and I leave there. And I went to another job. And right now the job I in, I got to thank God. Because everybody embraced me. They ran me. You know what I mean? That's what the MS want. When they come to prison, they got good MS there, you know. I got good people there. I just want the chance, the opportunity. I expected people that was there for a long time. You know what I mean? That will love this chance. But people don't find them. They got all the place to go. Families turn the back on them. And this is a very serious thing. So when they come back out, and the person in here, he go on and do this again and do this again. But let me know the stress and thing that the person going through. Not that the one going to do this thing, but they got, check a man coming to the prison and got 2 or 4 children. What are you going to do? You going to a job here to tell you, oh, a fellow passed and somebody, he went in prison, are you afraid? What do you expect you can do? You got to feed the children so you can try to go and do something foolish. But if you give him a job and you can put food on your table, you feel you can go and do this thing? No. Why you ain't going back and do it? I could have gone out and do it too. But God, if it went up for God, I don't know, I would be back at there again. And right now, since they come out of prison, I just took the church in prison. And since they come to prayer, I didn't stop going to church. That way, you know, I can stand here and praise my God. Right now, it's a church, a church named Earth Vessel Ministry International. I was going there for 4 years now. I just ran Sunday school. I teach what I learned up there, I teach them there. Miss Sweet could stay there. I was in charge of she was overhead or everything, but I was orally for the art, craft, and the art shop. I don't know nothing about art. I don't know nothing about nothing. I learned art in prison. And right now I go outside the school. I was teaching art. What I learned, I teaching them. I speak with them. I told them, I tell them, do not follow bad company. I try to put them on the right path for the young children that could get lead astray. But what we Christians need to do, not criticize people on the blocks and that kind of thing. We need to go there on the blocks and talk to the people. They need talk. They need somebody to come and talk with them. If you don't come and speak with them, some of them even know the Bible. I used to go around them and then ask about Christ and God. They don't know the Bible. Some of them don't know the Bible. I know the first thing they say, especially Christians that can't know themselves, where that, oh man, them in there, so them in a good. But you got to show the people that you care and you loving. And go and deal with the people. Don't try to discriminate a man because he's in prison. Anybody who go to prison. They're meant for dogs and all that. Every break of law is there. Sometimes you don't go to do nothing. Somebody can house or something. You mess them like the down. You know something you do. And they are still for your own right. You don't take nothing. It's like you go down and run on somewhere in front of you door or you stand, you get a slap on the fall on bam. Are you up there? But defending your own children. It's easy to go, it's easy. So I want to just embrace the investment that comes to we all for help and don't try to push the way. Because I know a lot of them get pushed away and right now I'm trying to help some of them right now. Because if I don't talk to them, they can end up there. So you got to speak with them. Don't try to fight them down. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else with questions? And can we restrict them to questions, please? Thank you. Time is running out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Calendar. I want to preface my question with this. I raised a young man in my home, and early last year, he was incarcerated for 9 months. At the end of that incarceration, came home, family welcomed him, everything was there for him. However, that young man has not shown that there is, any desire to change what got him incarcerated in the first place. And he has, seemingly reverted to where he was pre-incarceration. And I wanted to say that in addition to the fact that as a leader of the assembly, I saw a need for us to ensure that we embraced those who had previously been incarcerated, to ensure that the atmosphere here was conducive to them being reintegrated into society. In fact, when I knew that we had a young man who was being released, I made sure to communicate that to Pastor Jefferson and to insist that we had measures in place that would assist him with reintegration. With that being said, then, I want to ask the question, is our society really unforgiving, or are people afraid? And we can say, yes, as Christians, we must forgive and so on. But I feel, too, that a lot of what happens is not just discrimination, but that we have a society that is fearful. Even among Christians, though it should not be so, it can be so and is so for a lot of the society. I just want to give you an example. I don't want to invalidate what the former speaker has said, but I just wanted to say that, like, for instance, last year, there was a case in court where a young girl had been violently raped. And when really the details of the case were read out, it was that the perpetrator had committed that crime before, had been released from prison, and had committed the crime again. Now, when we hear those types of things in the media, I can't say that it would be unreasonable that people would indeed have a fear, because when you hear those things, it would happen. We had a murder that occurred last year, and it was said that that person had been previously incarcerated as well. I know that Ms. Weeks alluded to something similar. Therefore, I'm asking, is it fair to just say that our society just discriminates, or is it that there is a portion of our society really that they fear what might happen based on what has been reported, based on what is factual that has happened, if that is the case? And once that has been answered, Mr. Calendar, I have another question.
And this time it will only be a question, right?
But
Thank you.
I had to preface it just to give
No, that preface, no, just let it be a question next time. Thank you very much.
I want to thank you for your question and your honesty, because a lot of people will not be honest enough to say what you said. But I'll say this as well. Part of the problem that we have in this society is that because newspapers have to make a profit and they have to sell newspapers, sometimes they create that atmosphere that is not altogether 100% of reflecting of what is happening in society. In other words, they ramp up the story to sell newspapers and to make, and I'm sure that we've all noticed it sometimes. What you read in the papers is not always the accurate. They sit on certain words or certain actions and they blow it out of proportion. Having said that, it's not to say that your fears are not justified. But we live in a society where, as children of God, first of all, we've got to trust God. And God would never allow us, if we put our complete trust in God, to live where there's some society, people live where they can't come out of their front doors because they're so gripped by fear. But fear is a tool of the devil. And I want us to recognize that there will be some people that will come out and go back in. There's never going to be a 100% success story in this country. If we're looking for that, we're living in a fool's paradise. But there are going to be those that really need help and will really use the help. So we cannot then allow those to lose out because of what somebody else has done. And bearing in mind, one of the themes that we had is that our God is a God of second chance, third chance, fourth chance. So we should not shut down our bowels of mercy because somebody didn't do what we expect them to do. Sometimes you help people, and the people that you help will never thank you. But somebody else down the road that you've never helped before will recognize and help you. That's why the Bible says, cast your bread on the sea, and it will come back to you. It might not be the person that you helped today, but even after you've gone, your children will get a blessing. So we've still got to be true to God's word, regardless of the society that we live in. And God has put us in this earth to be the salt. We're supposed to be the salt of Barbados. And we're supposed to make sure that our society becomes better. And change starts with the church. I know we've got it wrong and we think we depend on government and all of that. But the church should be the most important institution in this country. And we should be the catalyst for change.
I thank you for your response. But really, I needed to hear what a lot of people are feeling, but would not be saying. Because it's one thing to say, yes, who would bring somebody into their house, but we have to deal with the real reality that whether it should be so or not, there is fear that is prevalent in our society. My next question is this. As a leader of the assembly, you are sometimes faced with the dilemma of, wanting to embrace the ex-offender and at the same time dealing with a congregation who might not, have all the information or might have, again, trepidations concerning dealing with the ex-offender. I would say to you, Pastor Jeff alluded to the fact that we have one young man here, but we do have other ex-offenders who are members of our congregation who've reintegrated well, who have been able to get on their feet with the help of the congregation. What measures do you put in place to really help people who are ex-offenders to get back into society as a church?
Thank you, Pastor Joel. One of the things I would say first that we are trying to do in terms of working with other entities or churches or persons is by bringing a level playing field of acceptance. What this looks like, you have Prisoner's Journey, which is done by Prison Fellowship. We have Embracing Change and Project Change. What we're trying to get done as we work with Lena and their department is now give recommendations. These are men who would have successfully gone through certain programs, and we see virtue in what they're doing. They're showing signs of, responding to whatever measures of training and what we expose them to, and we could say to them now on exiting, this is somebody who we definitely would validate. This is from somebody you can sow into. So I would encourage persons when they want to engage people coming out of the system, please contact organizations like ours so that we can validate these persons and say, yes, they would have been through a particular program, they would have shown signs of, the remorse for what they have done, and there's a commitment to Christ, and they just need help in these areas. So that's one thing I really would encourage persons to do. Hope that answers you.
Additionally, if I could also speak, I think the church also has a responsibility. At Ellerton, we are currently engaging in an initiative where we are preparing our congregation for dealing with different types of individuals in the population. And so it is important for the church to engage the congregation in training in terms of how do you deal with persons who are at risk? How do you deal with persons who have a myriad of challenges? You spoke about sex offending, which is a sex offense is one of the most violent crimes that any person could be privy to. And we are still working on sex offender programs. Because what you said, I take the context of everything you said in your explanation. It is very valid to make sure that you keep things in context. Rehabilitation is a very difficult process. We can take a person through 1,000,001 programs, but until they are ready to change, and Terrence would have spoken very strongly on that earlier, until you are ready to say, I'm ready to change, I'm ready to engage, I'm ready to stay away from this area, these challenges, because imagine how difficult it would have been for him to walk away from the red zone. He will tell you that there are some offenders that from the time they're ready to leave, we will set up the mechanisms through the church and their families and so on. And very often, these gang-related or group-related entities will turn up outside of our gates, sometimes posing very difficult situations for our security to get them to come back to them. And so it takes a lot, and I'm very proud of you, Terrence, to stand up in public and say, these are the choices that I have chosen to make. So what you said is very valid. Most jurisdictions which have been successful in terms of reintegration of offenders have been able to look towards a public health approach. And I always talk about the Singapore jurisdiction because understanding and respect for law and order comes from the time a child can have that level of understanding. Simple things like not throwing gum on the streets and how they discard of garbage, teaching people how to cope, survival skills like swimming and those types of things are what we have to look at as a society. So I take what the gentleman said earlier in terms of the educational system. And this is why we are moving towards engaging the community because by and large, we have failed a lot in terms of our systems and we have to relook at these things again. Of course, that will take greater conversations, but I want to assure you that we are going to be more vocal in the community. We had started a program on the CBC network where we would have unlocked our gates and you were able to see what goes on in the prison system. And we plan to do more of those programs, have more of these types of forums, so that fear which people have, those walls will slowly start to come down. And along with that, I just want to also go back to something Marlon said about having the conversations and taking those points of interest. Last week, I was sitting in the nail salon with one of my colleagues and the nail tech, and she was playing back a video of an ex-offender who would have taken up some plants from around her home. And she, even though within her right had, every right to be angry because he had stolen something from her, because she knew that we were prison staff, she asked us, well, I don't necessarily want to call the police and lock him up. I understand that, other neighbors are complaining and so on, so how do we deal with this issue? And we spoke to her about it, and we were able to resolve the situation and also get some help for him because he had actually run out of the amount of funds which he would have gotten from the prison. So we were able to connect him until he's able to find a job. So simple things like these, we're asking persons to try to assist with. So thank you very much for what you've said.
Any further questions?
Good night. I once read an article about a local boxer. He was doing quite well in his career here, and he wanted to go to international competitions. However, he was denied access to a visa. And oftentimes, persons who have criminal records, oh, sorry, the boxer was once convicted. Persons who had criminal records are denied passports or visas or any other way of travel. So I just wanted to know what is your take on that?
I think it goes back to what Marlon said earlier. Not just in terms of international export and so on, but also proving yourself to be worthy. And this is what we are encouraging guys to do. As you show yourself ready for the process, we will provide the recommendations so that we can connect you to the relevant persons. There are lots of things that we're still working on behind the scenes in terms of the law. Not only in terms of travel, but also the fact that an ex-offender cannot be employed by the government of Barbados unless their records have been expunged. And the consideration of that is not before 5 years. In jurisdictions where the reintegration is more successful, and again, I use the example of Singapore, the government employs 20% of ex-offenders. That is mandatory in their law. And so unless we move to that, we're talking about population crisis and people not having children, and yet still we have 700 odd men who are quite available to work. And so, again, we have to relook at how we value people and look at people as human resources. So these are some of the challenges that we are still faced with. We're still working on them from the legislative standpoint, but certainly within the context of ensuring that people are ready, they have to go through that process of rehabilitation first before they're granted such recommendations for those accommodations.
Any more questions?
Good night. I have two questions. The first one, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you were speaking initially in terms of jobs and them finding jobs, it seemed like there was a secrecy in terms of, okay, you have been to prison. So it was almost always a situation of, the boss found out that I had been to prison and then, I was discharged. But now you're talking about things like making recommendations and those kind of things. Do you think it would be easier if we're forthcoming with the information and you're able to sit down with the employers and talk about some of the same things you talked about? There are some programs he has gone through. He is showing improvement in this area and that area. I wanted to know what is your take on that. And also, we're talking a lot, obviously, about resolving the problem. What is being done in terms of preventing? And so earlier on, one gentleman spoke about, helping the young people with their parents in prison and so on. But even beyond that, how much of those testimonies do our young people at schools hear that they have access to know that it's not the bed of roses that they may be thinking, or I didn't expect to get there, I didn't expect it to go that far, but this is what happened. And so with those people who have, shown that change and so on, how much access do our young people in schools and in other areas have to those kind of testimonies to understand exactly what's happening?
So to answer your first question in relation to convictions, we always advocate for offenders to be very honest in relation to their records. The challenge is most employers know, in terms of their forms and so on, state very clearly, we don't want anybody that has any convictions. So ex-offenders have two choices. Either you lie and you hope that nobody finds out, or you try to be upfront. And very often, Terrence and some of the other guys who are here will tell you that they have been upfront. They have been honest about their convictions and their process and so on. Sometimes we ourselves send the letters of recommendation and they're still turned down. People say, no, we don't want ex-offenders here. And so it is something that calls for greater discussion. I think the government still has to take on that responsibility because as a country, that is the only way we will be able to go forward. The market is very competitive in terms of, you have a number of small business owners who are trying to make it as well. And so Mr. Bentham and he's the other rehabilitation officer assigned to the prison. We recently were part of a discussion with small business and enterprise and so on, and they had so many challenges. And these were persons who did not have a conviction record in terms of being able to get funding for their programs. So you could imagine having to face that type of a backdrop as well. And so we totally recognize and understand that the government has to take on some type of initiative where ex-offenders are hired within a catchment. There must be a percentage. That's the only way that we're going to be able to go forward successfully. Anybody else want to take the second question?
Repeat the second question, please.
Okay, in terms of the second question, I remember what you said. There are persons doing that. I had invited one gentleman to be here tonight. His name is Brother Mario Bruce. I don't know if he's here, but he is one person that has actively been doing a lot of good work in terms of his evangelistic work and sharing his testimonies. He's used a lot. I met him. The Criminal Justice Research Unit actually is one of the entities that use him, and he's a good example, and he's using his testimonies, and he's spreading it a lot. And we are currently working with a team of guys to see how we can get their testimony out with the permission of the prison, and we will use it within our school program so that they can get their message out through music and through their verbal testimonies.
I saw a hand over here with a question before. Over here? Okay.
Hi, good night to the panel. Good night to the panel. Now, I wanted, in terms of preventative measures, I want to hear your take as it relates to mentorship with young boys and teenagers, and if this would not help going forward with some of what is going on currently in prisons.
Thank you. In terms of mentorship, that is very important. And I think it was one question earlier where somebody said that men are not supported, and that is a true fact. And then there's also the absence of male role models in the homes. So it is a dire need for male mentors. And even in our prison ministries, is totally dominated by women. So we need men, both young and old, to come into the prison, because the prison is a place where we go and we try to say to these guys and challenge them that there's a different way. But all they see is old gray-haired men like myself, and there's a lot of young men in prison. So what we need is young Christian brothers to get involved in prison ministry, because that's one of the areas where you can help. And even before they get to prison, where we work with the children of prisons, etc., again, 95% of all volunteers are women. And that's part of the problem. I know men would say that we work, but we need to take some time and give back some time to help our boys, because only men can teach boys to be men. And at this juncture, I want us to give the women in this place a round of applause, because they've been doing a heck of a job trying to teach boys to be men. There are too many homes in this country that are not run by men, and women got to do both roles. And we see it all the time. We see grandmothers that are in their 70s struggling with 14 and 15-year-old boys, and they can't get food and they can't get clothes, and the children can't get shoes, you know. But we've got a lot of men working. You could step in and mentor a child and say, listen, I will help you with your school shoes. I will come and take you to, even I'll go to your football games just to cheer you on, and you know that there's somebody there for you. Your father might not have stepped up, but I'll be here for you. And that's what we need, and that's an appeal that we need. That's something that we can do right now, is that every man in this house can make a determined effort to say, I will give at least some bit of my time to help invest in a youngster.
A pleasant good evening. My name is Glenroy Bob. I would like to thank the panel for having this most important discussion. I'm going to state something first, then I will ask a question. I'm currently a facilitator for the Benevolent Anger Project. It's a project within the prison that deals with anger management. It's a 12-week course catered to dealing with the underlying cause of anger. And how do we get to the stage of tackling, as somebody says, get to the root versus the surface. So now, as this course is going on, last month on the 16th of December, 23 men graduated from this course. And as a result of this, I have to tell you something also. I'm also a formerly incarcerated individual who left from the New York State prison system, as over here they will call him a deportee. I don't classify myself as such. But what the key is, how do we now start the process of getting away from moving past stigma and discrimination? Because the key becomes this. A lot of people who have been incarcerated are scared and go into holes based upon this stigma and discrimination, and therefore now they put themselves in a vulnerable position, whereas they go back to the lifestyle that contributed to them going to prison. So I would like to thank Terrence. I would like to salute you, because the fact of the matter is a lot of people do not have the courage to speak about this particular issue. But I would like to also ask, as part of that prison aftercare ministry, I will be more than willing to be part of that prison aftercare ministry as we doing with that. One last thing. How do we get to healing? How do we get to healing to deal not just with the offender, but the victims and those in society, to be able to have a holistic approach to this whole process?
Again, a lot of responsibility has to fall on the government. Again, we cannot get away from it. And I want to refer back to what the gentleman over here in the white shirt said. What is the action plan? And those are some of the things that we are going to be unveiling as we progress through the year. The holistic approach, the restoration of that equilibrium in society, is by and large dependent on not only how many resources we pour into rehabilitating the ex-offender, but also the resources we pour into the victims, the resources we pour into the victims' families, the resources we pour into the ex-offenders' families. So very often we spend a lot of time looking at the offender. As Rev said earlier, largely publicized in the media and so on, but we do not pay enough attention, or we do not support, or we may support for a little time because it is salacious, depending on the type of crime, but we have to continue that effort in relation to being able to support the victims. And I want to refer back to what I think it's Pastor Joel said earlier, that fear is something that is very real, and it is something that we can only overcome by continuing to have the conversations and being very genuine and very real about what it is that we are feeling. We are in a society right now that everything is funny. We post everything on social media. I was telling a colleague of mine while I was taking a call in the car before I came in that somebody had actually posted a comment since when Kobe Bryant was a Bajan, which I thought was a very nasty comment to make. Are you looking at his legacy? Are you looking at the fact that he would have given his life back to the community in helping a lot of Afro-Caribbean persons to read and so on? So to make a comment like that, I thought was very inconsiderate. And very often we are quick to post stuff because that's the fad. You know, we're taking our selfies and so on. But as Rev said, how many of us are actually reaching out and volunteering? How many of us are looking around in our communities to see who are the persons who are at risk and how we can help them? So the healing process, again, has to be holistic. There are some jurisdictions which have entire departments which are mandated to look at victims. And we don't have that here in Barbados as yet. The probation department is currently very overworked and very strained because they have two mandates. They have to look at the pre-sentencing factor, and they also have to look at when offenders go home as well. So these are the types of initiatives that the government of Barbados needs to look more into, because going back to what this gentleman said again, there has to be a platform, there has to be an action plan. And we are working on it. I want to assure you that we are working on it. And those very hard questions, that action plan that you're referring to, we will continue to roll it out into the community.
Well, I have been told that it's time to wrap. Is there one last question? One
Yes,
last
sir.
question.
Yes, sir. Hello, good night.
We'll take the question, and we'll take 3 questions. One in the back, one here, and one there.
Okay. Good night. My concern is stigma and discrimination. And I wonder who created these 2 words. Was it the criminal or the non-criminal? Former Prime Minister Errol Barry said, "What mirror image do you have of yourself?" I have always been told by my mother, who died now about going 18 years ago, and when she died, I was a man. And I've always told people that. So therefore, I've always taken that responsibility. However, if my mirror image of myself is one of you up there, I have a very poor mirror image of myself. And I think if our young people and some of our old people were really look into the mirror and ask themselves, where am I going? What do I want? In 5 years' time, where would I like to, what would I like to achieve? And how would I get there? Does Glenderry, you name it, would be empty in one day. But if you take yourself and allow yourself to copy somebody else, man, you're in big trouble. So we need to stop and get our people to look at themselves. When I was growing up,
Excuse me, sir, I don't need to interrupt, but can you, we
Yeah.
need to ask that time. Can you ask the question, please?
that's
Thank
the question.
you. Yes,
The
question,
question
please.
is, would I go on the block? Would I join the Daily Box? Would I join the Limers? Would I want to be like them? I said no.
Well, sir, that has to be shaped very carefully. Because if you wake up every morning to a mother who's cussing and carrying on, and she's rolling weed, you hardly see your father if you even know who he is. When you step outside, there are firearms all over. Men walking through neighborhoods now, I often wonder if it's the Wild West, with firearms and saying that they need firearms for protection. It is difficult to shape that person if that is your social reality. I refer to a particular film which was published in social media through YouTube. Maybe I shouldn't call the name, but the film depicted a lot of the challenges which were occurring in the Barbadian ghettos. One of the challenges I had personally with the film was that there were no positive aspects in relation to at least one character trying to get out of the ghetto. So who you are is by and large shaped by a whole set of experiences. And at some point in time, you have to, in order to make a change, you have to come in contact with positive resources, somebody in your life who will be able to say to you, hey, you know, this is possible, you can get out. This does not have to be your social reality, you can change. So that mirror image, you spoke about us being Afro-Caribbean people. A lot of why men are struggling in society is because black men from slavery were ripped from their families. That was how they destroyed black families. So there are a lot of generational curses that we have to understand.
a lot of generational curses that we have to overcome and ask God for deliverance from. And we have to begin to, in reshaping that image, I take what you said in terms of understanding who we are, but we have to provide those positive influences, because there are people who wake up with this social reality where there are absolutely none.
Next question, quickly, please.
Good evening. My name is Cecilia Murray. I am the Behavior Change Specialist from the National HIV/AIDS Commission. I want to thank you guys for hosting this evening. It's very informative. My role here today is to see how best I can partner with you guys with coming up with a program. So at the end of the session, you can meet with me, because this is the end of the financial year and we have to come up with programs to change behavior, because my primary focus is looking at changing behavior. I am an action person. I'm not a person to come and stand very long and have seminars. I just like to work. So basically, I would like to meet with someone on the panel so we can come up with addressing some of these issues that was discussed here today. If it be working with your prison fellowship group, or if it is working with the families, because we work with children as well, we're looking at reducing risky behavior. So we don't want to wait until you're in prison then to come up with a grand idea. We're looking at working with young people on the ground to see how best we can come up with ideas so that we will reduce risky behaviors or triggers. For example, the negative behavior, the music, the violence, the guns, the moms, the dads who are not interested. We're looking at reducing those behaviors. So that's basically what the program is about. And I work with the Ministry of People Empowerment, because that is our major ministry. So we're looking at empowering people. We have social workers on board. We have all persons on board to help. And this is Person Says to Talk shop. But as long as you come to my office, knock on my door, action is there, the National HIV/AIDS Commission, where we work with all demographics. So we work with the parents, we can work with the children, the schools, we can work with the inmates, we can work with the churches, because I'm a Christian as well, and what I recognize about Christians is that, you know, we read a lot of things in the Bible and we want to talk, but when it comes to taking action, it's very, very difficult, because that's hard work. Talking is easy. I can stay here the whole day and quote all Bandura to you, and all these are things that I can quote from the University of the West Indies. But actually getting out there and working the highways and byways is very, very difficult. The challenges we meet, the doors that are slammed in our faces, persons think that we are like the previous Christian before, so they're not giving us a chance. But we have to have some sort of stickability within us as Christians. So if we go to a person and they don't want to hear us today, do like what Terrence did, go back tomorrow and see how you can help grand, see how you can help uncle, because we got to get our foot in the door somewhere. So however and wherever, whenever, and what kind of time we need to get to that person to see how best, because the head that you don't go is the head time that they may need assistance from you. So we just want to say thank you to you guys. It's not an easy job. Ma'am, I know for you it's not an easy job, because I know how the guys love to, you know, tell us how beautiful we are. So even that can be a deterrent. So I know it's a very challenging job. I want to applaud you guys, because we have to cater to all segments of our society. And thank you guys for coming to support the panel. So have a good evening.
Well, thank you very much for all those who contributed. Excuse me, is this going to be a question? It's a question. Question. And this is the last question. It has to preface again? Well, we're 15 minutes over the time. We can give her the... Okay, well, you go right ahead. But this is the last question, though, seriously.
Okay, good evening, church. My name is Gaylan Beckles, and just like Pastor Joel, I have had someone in the home, my brother, who was previously incarcerated. He spent altogether probably 13 years. He is 31 now, but he came home last August. We grew up in a house, my mother had 4 of us. He had no reason to do the things he did, but what everybody say, like, parents kind of are responsible for where the children go. That's not the case, because my mother did all she had to do. He was provided with everything he needed to do to get ahead in life, and he chose, because of bad company outside of the home, to go the other way. So he came home August 19th, and right now, at this present moment, he is missing since the 30th of September. People were put in place to we made a report and everything, but because of the stigma, because people pull up the record and see that he was previously convicted for this and that, and to tell the honest truth, he's not being sought out after like other people because of his convictions, right? He's a person just like anybody else. We've provided people at the head with a lot of leads, a lot of information, so much me and my other brother did to lead to certain persons to lead to his disappearance, And this is January, and up to now, no one came and said, well, this is the thing at hand. We would also often go to the police and try to get information, provide information, and all they can tell you is we're getting on it, but nothing is being provided. So the question is, what is going to be put in place for people who you trust to do something for you, people who are at the head? You trust these people to try to come through to help, right? But because of the stigma of the previous convictions, who are going to be put in place to ensure that these people do the job they're supposed to do? Right? That's it. Thank you.
That's a very difficult question. What I will say to you is I will have a private conversation with you. I will not be able to speak publicly to you on that matter. I do applaud your ability to stand and talk about it publicly, and I know that you must be going through a lot of pain, but I am not in a position to speak to you publicly on that matter, so I will see you after.
Well, before we wrap, I just want to give the panelists an opportunity to give some closing remarks before we wrap up the discussion for this evening. So we start with Neil.
First of all, I just want to thank the ministry here at People's Cathedral for facilitating such a discussion, and I want us to give them a round of applause. Amen. And I just want to say to us that we should thank God that He's given us the opportunity to work in this area. It's a God-given opportunity. And sometimes the people that are least looked upon in society are the ones that need the most help. And I always say, there but for the grace of God goes I. Because it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter where you are, you don't know what tomorrow holds, and you could just be driving your car and hit somebody and you end up in prison. So it's there but for the grace of God. It's only the grace of God that is keeping us. And I also always say, and it might just be me alone, but I've done things in my life that I'm not proud of, and it's just because I wasn't caught or disgraced that I didn't disgrace my family. So sometimes we've got to look at it through the eyes of Jesus. And when Jesus looks at every one of us, He looks at us with eyes of love and compassion. So I pray that after this session, we'll be more compassionate, and I'm looking forward to the men in this room to stand up and be counted. Men, I'm issuing a challenge to the men in this room that we need to do a bit more to save this generation that's coming up. There's a generation of men that are coming up that don't know what it is to be fathered, and we've got to stand in the gap and father them. And I want us to pray for the young people in this and the old ones in this nation so that we can make a difference. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm humbled.
I echo the same sentiments. Thank you very much, Pastor Joel, and to the prison ministry team, Pastor Jefferson. We really thank you for partnering with us at Family Heartbeat and Healing for the Soul Empowerment Network. And to the team here, I mean, you have been doing a great work. And what I want to do is to encourage those of you who believe this is a ministry that you want to add value to. Please see Pastor Jefferson and speak to him.
Beyond that, I want to give a challenge to every member of this church. We can make a difference where we are, within our homes, within our families, to make a difference. There was a sign I saw in a church in Jamaica, and it really hit me. The name of the church was big and bold, and underneath there it had free CXC classes. To me, that was big, because that was an initiative now launched by a church to impact a community. These are simple initiatives, I would say, that we can embark on as churches to engage in. We really need to meet that population, that at-risk population. A lot of our young people are unsupervised, and I'm saying this, speaking to this demographic, because this helps break the cycle. If we could work on them on the outside, it would prevent them from getting incarcerated. We need to be mentors to them. We need to be persons they can confide in. There's a lot of children. When we go into schools, there are many children who have no interaction with anything called church. They're not familiar with God or anything like that, and that's not good. And I believe we need to work on that. And piggybacking on what Neil said, that is super important. Men, step up, man up. We need to take our position as men. Reverend Griffith always say this to us: whom the enemy fear, he seeks to destroy. That's why there are over 700 men sitting in St. Philip in that institution. Only 25 females there right now. The majority are men. So men, we need to step up and be bold and do our duty as God assigned us to do. All right? So that is an encouragement for us to really take our position in society.
First, I want to start by thanking all of the ex-offenders, Terrence who spoke, all of the ex-offenders who are here, because you essentially strengthen what we're doing. You're showing the public that you're trying and you're successful. And it's not easy. They call us, they check in, they say, hey, Ms. Weeks, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. Or they speak to the prison ministry representatives to let them know what they're doing. And I really thank God for the fact that you turned up tonight so that you could have a voice. It was one thing for me reading it on paper, but for you to physically see who they are was extremely important. I also want to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Paris, who is part of our prison team. He and his wife, they're sitting over there. He's waving to you. Thank you so much to also have a member of the prison team who is here showing that prison officers are also very much engaged in the initiative as well. I thank God for you, only by the grace of God, because we had a team meeting this week and we said, hey, let's try to contact somebody from the HIV/AIDS Commission, because the marketing that you guys have done is brilliant. We were talking about the tourism slogan, let's play our part. We heard that for years. And Giggard and Boo transformed this nation into understanding so many different things. It's just about having simple conversations at levels that everybody can understand. And so when you stood, I was like, Lord, I thank you, because we talked about your department just this week about approaching you to find out what it is you guys did to be able to get Barbadians to understand at a national level that this was a serious health problem. Crime is the same thing. It is a health problem. And if you don't deal with it at the root, it continues to spread. What I will say, taken away, because we have to have other conversations, there were other persons who had questions, and so I hope that we can have other forums like this here and other places. But if the church does not speak, if the church does not, I want to go back to what Rev and Marlon said and emphasize it, society is speaking. We have to be able to talk about the very challenging questions. I saw a video just yesterday with a young man who was walking up behind a big grown woman with a firearm. I wouldn't say the type of firearm it was, but carrying on. So the world is speaking, and by the flick of a switch or a finger, the information is getting everywhere. So if we don't play our part in relation to combating that, a lot of the studies last year that we conducted show that people do not feel accepted. Going back to the mirror image that the gentleman talked about earlier, a lot of reasons why people say they join gangs and groups is because that is the place they feel accepted. The sexual abuse that's going on in the home, we don't want to talk about as a church when people bring some of these things to our attention. There are a lot of things that are taboo that we do not want to discuss, but we have to discuss them because that is the only way we will show people that there's another way. And I'll end with one of my favorite hymns. The vilest offender who truly believes that moment from Jesus, our pardon receives. Thank you so much.
And I'd like to say thank you to all the panelists, to Lena Weeks, the sentence manager for the prison service, Nia Dowden, executive director of Prison Fellowship Barbados, and Marlon Charles of Healing for the Soul Barbados. We do thank you for coming and sharing with us all of the information that you ably shared with us tonight. I want to thank all those who participated by asking questions, all those who viewed us online as well, and for all you who have attended, we thank you very much for your participation. I believe that the prison ministry in the future will be putting on similar events, so those who didn't get their questions answered tonight, I guarantee you before the year is through, you will get them answered. So thank you once again for coming, and God bless.